Derek Monroe, driving through his peaceful neighborhood, didn't expect his evening to be interrupted by flashing lights and the familiar wail of a police siren. He wasn't speeding, nor had he broken any laws. Yet Officer Lisa Hendricks seemed certain otherwise. Imagine the jarring moment when you're simply minding your business, and out of nowhere, someone imposes their biases on you. This is where things begin to unravel, where unjust assumptions creep in, leaving you questioning why you've suddenly become a target. Derek, in his sleek Tesla, didn't fit the officer's internal narrative, and that's where the danger lay. For a businessman like Derek, success comes from discipline and perseverance, yet in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. He hands over his license and registration calmly, as any law-abiding citizen would. But beneath that calm exterior, there's a storm brewing, the frustration of being unfairly judged based on nothing more than appearance. Think about it. How often do we get pigeonholed by other people's stereotypes before we even get a chance to speak? It's like stepping into a room and immediately being told you don't belong, simply because of what others think they know about you. In life, we often encounter moments where our identity or achievements are questioned. Derek's new Tesla, a symbol of his hard-earned success, now becomes a reason for suspicion. It's a brutal reminder that for some, the finish line keeps moving. What's most disturbing is that this isn't just about a traffic stop. It's about the constant weight of proving yourself over and over again. Imagine having to validate your success at every turn, simply because it doesn't align with someone else's narrow view. But Derek's journey doesn't end here, and neither does the story. As Officer Hendricks persists, the tension mounts, though Derek remains outwardly composed. His mind races with thoughts of fairness, justice, and the fragility of this moment. He cooperates fully, license, registration, all in order. Yet there's no relief. The officer's distrust, thick in the air, cuts through every interaction. You ever notice how, even when you're doing everything right, some people just can't seem to shake their preconceived notions? It's like talking to a wall made of assumptions, no matter how reasonable you try to be. Derek is asked to step out of his car, and that's when the weight of the situation becomes truly unbearable. Why is cooperation not enough? Why does compliance come with further demands, especially when it's clear that there's no just cause? There's a lesson here, a bitter one, about how we sometimes find ourselves trapped in someone else's narrative, no matter how hard we try to break free. It's like trying to swim upstream when the current of bias pulls you under. This tense interaction is more than a mere inconvenience. It's a reflection of something much deeper. Derek's calmness masks a storm brewing beneath the surface. He's been here before, not in this exact moment, but in others just like it. Moments where his worth, integrity, and dignity were all questioned because of the color of his skin. But the story is far from over, and as the tension builds, so does the sense that things are about to spiral. As Derek stands beside his car, the neighborhood begins to stir. Curious eyes peek through blinds, and slowly, a small crowd gathers. Instead of stepping forward to support Derek, many of his neighbors look on with silent judgment, their faces a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Isn't it strange how, in moments of conflict, people often choose to watch from a distance rather than intervene? Derek, who has lived here for years, suddenly feels like an outsider in his own community, an all too familiar feeling for many. The scene speaks volumes about human nature. In times of injustice, it's easier to stand back and observe rather than to get involved. Some might think, "It's not my place," or "It's none of my business." But this passivity only adds to Derek's isolation. Picture yourself in his shoes, surrounded by familiar faces that have now turned cold, as if they are waiting for something to happen, but hoping not to get too close. It's a reminder that inaction, too, can be harmful. Even more disheartening, these are the same neighbors who've exchanged pleasantries, shared smiles, and waved from their driveways. Yet now, in a moment when Derek needs support the most, they remain silent. It's a stark reflection of how quickly community can dissolve when faced with discomfort. But this moment isn't over, and neither is Derek's ordeal. As more eyes gather, the pressure mounts, and the situation teeters on the edge of something far more dangerous. Derek, feeling the situation spiraling beyond his control, asks to call someone for assistance. It's a reasonable request. Who wouldn't want a lifeline in a moment like this? Yet, instead of de-escalating the situation, Officer Hendricks grows visibly more aggressive. Her voice sharpens, her body language stiffens, and the tension escalates. Have you ever experienced that moment when a simple request, made out of a need for clarity or help, is met with hostility instead of understanding? It's as if reaching out for help makes you seem more suspicious, not less. As Hendricks' temper flares, backup arrives. The sound of more sirens wails in the distance, and soon Derek finds himself surrounded by officers. What started as a single, tense exchange now turns into something far more intimidating. Imagine being in Derek's position, standing there, watching the situation multiply in intensity before your eyes. His mind races with the realization that this could go very, very wrong. It's like watching a match get closer to gasoline, knowing that a single spark could set everything ablaze. The presence of more officers does nothing to ease the situation. Instead, Derek is now the focus of even more scrutiny. He knows that this could end badly, not because of anything he's done wrong, but because the system has stacked the odds against him. With every passing second, the atmosphere grows heavier, the weight of expectation pressing down. And just when it seems like things couldn't get worse, they do. But this isn't the end, only the beginning of what will become an even more complex and troubling standoff. Lieutenant James Conrad arrives on the scene, stepping out of his patrol car with authority, but instead of calming the escalating situation, his presence only fuels the fire. Conrad's eyes lock onto Derek, not as a respected community member, but as a potential criminal. His tone is sharp, his demeanor rigid. There's no attempt to understand or de-escalate. It's a chilling reminder of how systemic racism operates. Sometimes it's not the words spoken, but the weight of unspoken prejudice that makes the situation 10 times worse. Derek, who's been through countless meetings, boardrooms, and business deals, now faces a completely different kind of authority. Conrad doesn't see the successful entrepreneur or the philanthropist. He sees only a man in handcuffs waiting to happen. Imagine that, being reduced to a stereotype in the blink of an eye. It's as if all of Derek's accomplishments, everything he's built, are invisible, hidden beneath the blanket of bias. Racism doesn't need to be loud or overt. It's often subtle, woven into the fabric of everyday interactions. This moment isn't just about one bad cop or a misunderstanding. It's about an entire system that allows these prejudices to fester. Lieutenant Conrad's actions reflect something larger, something systemic. Derek stands there, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. And the worst part? He knows that in this moment, he's powerless to change how Conrad sees him. But not everyone at the scene is blind to the injustice unfolding, and there's a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Just as the situation seems to reach a breaking point, Officer Matthew Hayes, a newer recruit, steps forward. Among the sea of tension and suspicion, he recognizes Derek from a local charity event they both attended a few months back. Suddenly, there's a flicker of doubt in Hayes' mind. Could this all be a terrible mistake? It's a subtle shift, but sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to question the status quo. You ever notice how one small act of humanity can make all the difference in a sea of chaos? Hayes begins to think differently, realizing that something isn't right. He's seen Derek in a completely different light before, not as a suspect, but as someone respected in the community. It's a powerful moment because it highlights how a single encounter, a shared experience, can challenge long-held biases. This is something to remember in our own lives. Sometimes, by stepping back and reconsidering our assumptions, we can prevent situations from spiraling out of control. Hayes, guided by his instincts, decides to dig deeper, and that decision will change everything. In this high-stakes moment, Hayes insists on running the car's information again. His fellow officers exchange glances, unsure of why he's questioning the situation, but Hayes is undeterred. He knows something is off, and he's willing to put his own reputation on the line to figure it out. It's a reminder that real courage often comes in quiet forms, through actions others might not understand. And just as Hayes suspects, the truth is about to come to light. After Officer Hayes pushes for a second look at the car's information, the truth finally surfaces. The vehicle belongs to Derek. No stolen car, no hidden agenda, just a man in his own Tesla, driving through his own neighborhood. As the confirmation comes through, Lieutenant Conrad's stern expression falters for a moment. Begrudgingly, he acknowledges the mistake, but his apology feels hollow. Derek, though cleared of any suspicion, is left with a bitter taste in his mouth. Have you ever experienced an apology that didn't quite make things right? That's exactly what Derek feels now, relief mixed with frustration. Despite the clear resolution, Officer Hendricks struggles to shake her own suspicions. Even when faced with the facts, her biases cloud her judgment. She stands there, stiff and silent, clinging to her original belief that Derek didn't belong in that car. This kind of cognitive dissonance is powerful. When someone's beliefs are so ingrained, they refuse to accept the truth even when it's right in front of them. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? How often do we see the same thing in everyday life, where people double down on their assumptions rather than admit they were wrong? As Derek watches the scene unfold, he realizes that even though the truth is out, the damage has already been done. His sense of security, his place in the community, feels forever altered. And yet, there's no time to dwell on that now, because something unexpected is about to happen. Officer Hendricks, the very person who initiated this unjust ordeal, is about to face a reckoning of her own. In an unexpected turn, the weight of the situation finally hits Officer Hendricks. As Derek prepares to leave, she stands frozen, her rigid demeanor cracking under the pressure of what just transpired. It's as if the gravity of her actions comes crashing down all at once, and for the first time, she truly sees Derek, not as a suspect, but as a person. You ever notice how sometimes it takes a moment of intense confrontation to force us to confront our own biases? Hendricks, overwhelmed by the realization of her deep-seated prejudice, begins to crumble emotionally in front of her fellow officers. Her breakdown is not just a personal reckoning, but a public one. The officers around her exchange glances, unsure of how to react, while Derek watches, exhausted by the ordeal. There's something striking about seeing someone who was once in power suddenly become vulnerable. It's a reminder that we all carry unconscious biases, even those of us sworn to protect others. In that moment, Hendricks is no longer the authoritative figure who pulled Derek over. She's a human being, grappling with the consequences of her own actions. But for Derek, the damage is already done. Although he leaves the scene physically unharmed, the emotional toll lingers. This experience, one of many he's faced in his lifetime, serves as another painful reminder of the systemic racism that runs deep in society. As he drives away, Derek knows that his story isn't unique. It's part of a much larger narrative, one that needs to change. And while Hendricks may be coming to terms with her own biases, Derek is left wondering if anything will truly be different the next time he's pulled over. So now that you've walked through this story, let me ask you, how many times have you stood by, watching something unfold, but chose to stay silent? It's uncomfortable, right? This tale isn't just Derek's story. It's a mirror reflecting a reality we all play a part in. How can you break the cycle? How can you start to question the biases we all hold, consciously or not? It's time to do more than just observe. It's time to act. The power to change, to confront these systems of inequality, starts with understanding. And that understanding begins with you. Are you ready to challenge your own assumptions? To step up when others stay quiet? If so, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stick with me, and let's continue exploring these crucial conversations. There's so much more to uncover, and the journey to real change is just beginning.